Live from Chattanooga, Tennessee, it's Nooganomics with David Tulis.
We have enjoyed clear skies for at least a couple of days here over Hamilton County and Chattanooga, unmolested by aircraft, uncrisscrossed by jet contrails, as they're called by some, or sky stripes, as I call them, which are policy ejections or injections into the troposphere or the stratosphere, depending on the height of the airplane. And to find out more about this whole program, we are going to talk now with Dr. J Marvin Herndon. He's a geoscientist. He is a maverick geophysicist, as the Washington Post once called him. And you can find out more about him at his website, nuclearplanet.com. And he has made what I understand to be a major advance in the story of stratospheric aerosol geoengineering, which is, as I've been reporting at Nooganomics.com since March of last year, the program to deal with a threat to our country greater than terrorism, according to the federal president, and that is the weather, and that under the rubric, the kind of fuzzy, abstractified rubric of climate change or global warming. And the program has accelerated in the past year or two. Dr. Herndon says it has accelerated in the past year. I noticed it remarkably changing the nature of sunlight let's say 3 summers ago, and I didn't come to my attention in a grabby way until last year, when after a very sunny day full of as it's called chemtrailing over Chattanooga and a blue sky, the next day, also a warm day, there was a freak snowstorm downtown in Chattanooga that lasted 5 minutes and then went away. And I said, this is, I'm putting things together, and we now have a story that your editor and host, David Tulis, cover as journalist and editor of Nooganomics.com. Dr. Herndon, you're not just, you've been writing about the discovery you've made about the substance that's being deployed in the sky. And we're going to ask you about, you're going to tell my listener what that material is, what it is he's breathing on these artificially cloudy days over Hamilton County. But I want you to say something about who you are. You're kind of an old warhorse scientist. You're 71 years old, and you've been engaging yourself in the study of the Earth for many decades. How is it that you're a maverick?
Well, let me give you a very brief background. After I earned my PhD in nuclear chemistry, I was invited to give a presentation, and there were 2 very senior people in the audience who apparently were impressed about something and invited me to be a postdoctoral apprentice for 3 years and just learn from them and do whatever research I wanted. One was Nobel laureate Harold C. Urey, and the other was Professor Dr. Hans E. Seuss. And I learned from these men. They were very senior. They were some of the greats in the first half of the century. And I learned from them and basically started making discoveries. But I discovered myself very early on that the way with the government funding and the consensus-only mentality that has developed, that you can't really make discoveries and get government funding. So I was sort of excommunicated, but I was on to something important. So I just kept working on my own dime and made one discovery after the other about how the Earth behaves, what causes the galaxies to have the shapes that they have. All that stuff's on my website, nuclearplanet.com. Well, when I started seeing a couple of years ago that this aerial spraying was intense, I began to try to find out what it was, and nobody's talking. And so I decided to use a little bit of forensic type science and discovered with high reliability what the stuff is that they're spraying. And what they're spraying is coal fly ash. Now, the utilities, many of them burn coal. and the coal forms ash. The heavy ash settles out, and the very finely powdered ash, it used to go up the smokestack, but it's so toxic that the regulations in all of the Western countries require that that be trapped and disposed of or stored or sequestered. That's called coal fly ash. It's too toxic to go up the smokestack and reach people. But this is the stuff that's been covertly being sprayed over populations, not only in the U.S., but in Europe, in Australia, New Zealand, and probably other countries. So this is terrible stuff. And it's the government poisoning citizens. Now, why are they doing this? There are probably a lot of agendas. But let me draw a couple of divisions here. The academics, people, professors at universities, they talk about that we have to do something about this so-called global warming. We need to put powdered stuff in the stratosphere. That's way up high to reflect sunlight, and they call that geoengineering. But they say that's some future thing they might have to do. But the reality is, a form of geoengineering or weather modification has been going on for 15 or more years with ever increasing volumes and quantities of material and frequency of dispersal. And that's covert. It's very secretly done. It's not being put in the stratosphere. It's being put in the troposphere. This is the area where clouds form, where weather happens. And this is the part of the atmosphere that mixes with the air we breathe. And that's the difference between what is being talked about and what is actually being done.
So are you saying, Dr. Herndon, that spraying at 3 miles is more dangerous to my listener than spraying at 8 miles where the stratosphere is up high?
Yeah, the stratosphere is even higher than 8 miles. I mean, it goes way, way up. And planes that only really special planes can get high into the stratosphere. Like, you remember the, what was it called? The Black Hawk, or the spy planes, SR-70 or SR-77.
Yes.
The spy planes that used to fly high over the Soviet Union. It takes quite a special plane to have sustained flight in the stratosphere. Now, we're not talking about just the edge of the stratosphere, the lower edge. We're talking about high up in it. And people have thought, the academics have thought of putting titanium dioxide, which is a white powder, or sulfuric acid, high up in the stratosphere, putting it up with those special planes that are built to fly at high altitudes, or shooting it from some kind of a cannon, or putting it in balloons that can go that high.
You mentioned these, Dr. Herndon, you mentioned these various theories. They seem extraordinarily cockeyed, like firing 16-inch cannon into space and having the shell explode with talcum, kind of a talcum powder. They seem ludicrously expensive and kind of cockeyed.
This whole thing is cockeyed.
Well,
beyond belief, because and here's the worst part of it. You remember when the UN's IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, started promoting all of this global warming, and Al Gore came out with his movie, An Inconvenient Truth, and there was all this political push about global warming. Kids were being taught that this is what's happening. Well, and then you remember the ClimateGate scandal, when some of the emails were hacked from an organization, the East Anglia University, that was cooperating with the IPCC, and it showed that a lot of the people were trying to deceive the public. They were fudging data. They were promoting something that wasn't based solely on truth. Well, it's even worse than that. Each year the IPCC evaluates these models that all seem to show that, hey, we got global warming going on. Well, of course, models show whatever you want them to show. But all of those models are flawed for a couple of good reasons. One, not a single one of them includes what has been happening covertly, the spraying that you see in the sky. And without that being included in the model is just totally invalid. So all of the conclusions that have been drawn by the IPCC are invalid. Okay, and our government is about to buy into all of that. So that's I mean, that's cockeyed beyond all imagination.
Let me ask you this, Dr. Herndon. We're talking with J Marvin Herndon in San Diego. He's a scientist. He runs TransDigm Corporation as a lifetime researcher in the nature of the Earth, the Earth's core. He just has one of his papers is about a reactor at it's kind of a small nuclear reactor at the very center of the Earth that affects its magnetic fields and very, very deep science. Is it your understanding that this spraying program affects the weather, or does it just simply does it harmlessly deflect sunlight and reduce temperatures, or is there something in the way of feedback loops or unintended consequences that the listener needs to hear about, Dr. Herndon?
Well, the academics all talk about it reflecting sunlight, and this is hypothetical, though. All right, because the academics talk about the stratosphere and they talk about in the future. What is happening is the spraying in the lower atmosphere, in the troposphere. And I can tell you a few things. It might reflect a little bit of sunlight, but it also absorbs heat from the sun and warms the atmosphere. It also prevents some of the heat. You know, normally the sun shines on the earth in the daytime, and at nighttime the earth cools, it radiates the heat away. Well, those artificial clouds hold some of that heat in. That material that's being sprayed not only warms the atmosphere, holds the heat in, but it retards the fall of rain. All of these things contribute to causing global warming, not reversing it, not doing the opposite, not cooling the earth. So you have to think, well, here is and how is it being sold to people? What are our leaders being told to justify this? My guess is that they're being told that the government has to do something about the global warming, and people can't be trusted. So the government's going ahead and doing it.
Well, you mentioned justification, Dr. Herndon, but there seems to be some justification being built into the National Academy of Sciences book that came out that I looked at very carefully in, I think, February, that proposes a mass chemtrailing program to dim the sun and cool the planet. That's the title is dimming the sun and cooling the planet.
Well, but this is this hypothetical thing about what's happening in the upper atmosphere, or what is proposed for the upper atmosphere. So you see there's like two things going on. The academics, and I can't believe that people who are members of the National Academy of Sciences are not aware of what's going on in the covert spraying that's been going on for 15 years or more. But they don't talk about that. They talk about global warming and how we have to cool the planet. Well, there's a lot of money to be gained from research, from projects, from all sorts of things. It's a cash cow for many, many people, and that's one of the motives is to enrich people.
But it's not a cash cow for the solar industry, Dr. Herndon. The solar industry is damaged when the power of the sun is diminished and its energy deflected by these cloud systems, which we often have here in Hamilton County.
Right, but that's not the kind of money we're talking about. We're talking about money for research operations. We're talking about money for massive spraying programs. We're talking about money that for carbon credits that'll probably be put in place. We're talking about a shift of income from countries that have a high standard of living because they work hard to produce things, to poor countries. I mean, there are political motives involved. And there's also some people think that this is all part of a scheme to essentially install a one world government run by the UN.
What is the danger to my listeners' health, Dr. Herndon, of coal fly ash? What if coal fly ash is deposited, as it is frequently over San Diego, the formerly blue skies of San Diego, and the beautiful skies we have here in Chattanooga, when there are no jets of this kind? What is the danger to my listeners' health? What is in coal fly ash that's injurious?
A lot of things. First, let me say that very fine particles less than 2.5 micrometers in diameter. Particles like you get in pollution in cities, for example. Studies have shown that those particles, I guess more or less irrespective of origin, is dangerous to people's health. They've been shown to be associated with hospital admissions, with death and premature death, with low birth rate, with lung inflammation and diabetes, and risk for cardiovascular disease, and risk for male infertility. Now, this is just the fine particles. Coal fly ash is that, plus water extracts a whole bunch of toxic chemicals from coal fly ash. Arsenic, for example, which can cross the placenta in a pregnant woman to her baby. Coal fly ash exposed to water releases aluminum in a chemically mobile form. Now,
what does that mean?
Aluminum's an abundant element in the surface of the earth, but it's always locked up tight. When there was worries about acid rain back in the 70s, the big worries were because acid rain could cause aluminum to be released from certain geologic materials like mine tailings, and that could cause die-offs of forests and just terrible things to the environment. But the acid rain problem was pretty much solved by trapping the gases that cause it. But coal fly ash releases aluminum in a chemically mobile form. So the same things that we're concerned about the acid rain that released aluminum can be said about the coal fly ash. It can cause forest die-offs, and we're seeing this in California. We're seeing major impacts. But the worst thing is that aluminum has been implicated in neurological diseases, Alzheimer's, autism spectrum disorder, attention deficit disorder, Parkinson's. I mean, the aluminum is, people never developed any kind of resistance or protections for aluminum in a chemically mobile form, because in nature it's not mobile. It's locked up tight. And so this is perhaps the most dangerous. But there are other things in coal fly ash that are released. There's chromium, there's mercury, probably 30 or 40 elements, including radioactive elements such as uranium and thorium.
Now, these elements are all in coal fly ash, Dr. Herndon, that are trapped by scrubber systems at TVA coal plants here in the Chattanooga area. They're not allowed to go up the smokestack, and huge investments have been made by this federal utility here to trap it. But you're saying that this material, which is famous for its recycling powers, right? Coal fly ash is famous for recycling uses, and maybe we can mention after my important commercial messages what some of those are. That is you're saying intentionally dispersed by jet aircraft as part of this program to alter the weather and control rainfall and heat.
Tens, if not hundreds of millions of tons of it.
This is David Tulis. We're talking with Dr. Marvin Herndon of TransDigm Corporation. He's a longtime researcher who has he's a geophysicist. He's called a maverick geophysicist by the Washington Post, and studies the Earth, studies how mountains are formed, how ridges are formed, where the fjords in Norway came from, what is at the very center of the Earth, how is that studied. He's been at it for decades, and we're finding out more about sky striping here in Hamilton County and where you, my listener, live. Hang on.
Live from Chattanooga, Tennessee, it's Nooganomics with David Tulis.
It's hard to call J Marvin Herndon a crank. He's an old warhorse scientist. He's a geophysicist. He's been called a maverick geophysicist by the Washington Post. He's the author of many, many academic papers that touch on how fjords are made, how mountains are made, what is at the core of the Earth, what do the radiate magnetic fields say about what's down in there. He's the author of a book, Herndon's Earth and the Dark Side of Science. You can get that at Amazon. He's made many very deep and complex discoveries that he's argued for in papers. And also, you can read, if you want to get lost in the deep science, you can go to his website, nuclearplanet.com. He's come to my attention because he's broken the story about so-called chemtrailing. And I don't like that word chemtrailing because it sounds like it's taking part in what the CIA classifies as conspiracy theory. That's a word that kind of a smear word used started back in the 1960s, I think, to discredit anybody who has a non-establishment narrative about what they're seeing or what the government may be doing as against public health and as against the interests of the innocent public. And Dr. Herndon, who runs TransDigm Corporation and has made this discovery, is on the phone with us from San Diego. Dr. Herndon, you complained to the chief of police and the mayor of San Diego about the loss of blue skies over San Diego. What is it you told these officials, and what was the response?
Well, I told them basically. See, the one thing that I need to mention is I am, I believe, the first scientist to publish a paper in the peer-reviewed scientific literature presenting evidence of what is being sprayed covertly, and that's being coal fly ash. And so I wrote the mayor of San Diego and the city council and the chief of police, basically describing the nature of the substance being sprayed, the effects on people, and saying that they should be warning people who are particularly vulnerable. We're talking about pregnant women, children, the elderly, people with compromised immune and respiratory systems. Warn them to stay indoors when the spraying's going on and maybe get filters for their homes. And I received nothing from the mayor. And I wrote, actually, I think a couple of letters. I did hear at one point from a lieutenant in the internal affairs department of the police department, who I think was number one trying to check me out to see if I was some kind of a nut or something, and number two trying to deflect me to complain somewhere else. But after a lengthy conversation, I didn't time it. It may have been an hour. neither of those, the deflection didn't work at all, because I made it very clear that it is the responsibility of the chief of police to protect the citizens of San Diego and to warn those who are in danger. You know, we have laws on our books of felony child endangerment, for example, that this would come under.
And your idea is to appeal to local officials who have no authority over the federal government, but who do have, you're suggesting they have a kind of fiduciary duty to make a claim against some unknown party to stop what you say in your papers, Dr. Herndon, an activity for which there's no public disclosure, no informed consent, and no public health warnings. That's a statement I've read in at least two of your papers that touch on this topic. Why are those things important?
One of the, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
One of the arguments that this police lieutenant said, well, of course, the police department doesn't have the manpower, the money, or the equipment. It's just, this doesn't have the capability of the resources to do anything. And I said, look, the only resource that is necessary is, number one, to call a major press conference and make this a public matter and to warn people. And two, to file a lawsuit, probably with the Supreme Court or headed to the Supreme Court, to get a cease and desist order over whomever is spraying this material until the safety of it can be ascertained beyond doubt. He didn't have an answer for that.
Well, I'm a former newspaper editor, Dr. Herndon, and own a radio station, and I'm a journalist. I have, of course, much to say in the way of editorial opinion, but still, I'm a journalist, and I've desisted making that an effort like yours. Because I'm just afraid of the time it takes, the effort it takes to get anybody to even say anything who's a public official. And it seems kind of despairing and kind of not very hopeful person to take that position. But you've done that.
Let me tell you about our mayor. Our mayor is fairly new at the job. The previous mayor, who was elected to a lot of different positions. I think he was in Congress for a term, or at least one term. But everybody knew what was going on. But finally, when he became a mayor of San Diego, some women complained and got an attorney. And he ended up having to resign because of doing untoward things toward women. So the mayor of San Diego is fairly new at the job, and he's been described as, he and his wife have been described as looking like they came from central casting. I mean, it looks like perfect mayor with a very attractive wife. But I tend to, and it's been rumored that he would very much like to be the governor of California. But you know, I think he's missing the boat. Instead of being cowardly and not taking a stand, if he stood up, called a national press conference, made a major issue of what's going on, and stood on his hind legs and acted like a man and demanded explanations and cessation and so forth, this would put him right to the national headlines quickly, and he'd probably end up being the governor of California.
You're making a great suggestion, Dr. Herndon, and I've thought of that as well. What you're offering is a kind of fuel for a kind of a free market, anti-government, pro-family, pro-environment position. So if say a Senate candidate or a House of Representative candidate, or even one for governor, says, you know, I'm convinced by Dr. Herndon's papers that this is coal fly ash, which may have actually come from coal pits here, coal fly pits here in Tennessee, now being sprayed illegally and secretly by the government. Think of the arguments. Think of the constituencies to whom that appeals. The environmentalist is on board, right? You're liberal because he's thinking about big, the utilities are the bad guys and they're killing us. And here they're doing it even more by selling this coal ash to the government in secret, and the government's pouring it on us. So they're implicating industry and utilities, and it could be an attack on coal, right? Then you've
there's no end of things, and the important thing is that put it this way, if the world were normal, if our country were normal, say like it was more or less in the 50s or 60s. And say some foreign government started flying over our cities, pouring out this material. Their planes would be shot down quickly. I mean, there would be nothing to stop it. I mean, that would not be tolerated. But we've gotten to a position where so much of government is without adherence to laws. I mean, government should be based upon law, and there's a government lawlessness in place, and certainly spraying toxic materials on a daily basis over where people breathe. There's a Fritz Haber, a very famous German chemist, also did some rather infamous things. He developed the poison gas for World War I. Well, he came up with a rule. It's called Haber's rule. And basically it says this: a low dose for a long time is equivalent to a high dose for a short time. And I think that applies essentially to the coal fly ash. You get a low dose continuously, and it has the net effect of being like getting a major dose in a short time.
Well, you're describing coal fly ash, which is what you, Dr. Marvin Herndon, proposed is the material sprayed by jets on certain days here over Hamilton County. I keep a record of those days. And these are, I call them visitations, because they are heavenly, they are glorious, they are fantastic, they are remarkable. And we've had them here in Chattanooga on the 2nd of December, the 5th of December, the 6th, the 10th, the 11th, the 12th. And here we are Wednesday. Nothing has happened in the skies since then. We have very dry skies because there's no moisture to cause these so-called contrails. But you're saying...
Whoa. Let me make a correction about this contrails business.
Go ahead.
Okay. This is the ploy that this started in, there was a paper published, I think it was in 2007, I'd have to check that, by the U.S. Air Force, where they said there is no such thing as chemtrails. Okay? They say they are contrails. Contrails are like ice crystals that form from the moisture in aircraft exhaust. And there are no adverse health effects. Okay, this is patent lying, because number one, most of the jets today produce very little moisture in their exhaust. To form contrails, which are ice crystals, it has to be very cold where it is and very humid. And this is a fairly rare circumstance. It doesn't happen every day and have the crisscrossing. That's nonsense. But this is the story that's being promoted. This is the lie that is being told, that these are contrails. So contrail is a really bad word. I would rather use the word chemtrail to distinguish it, right, even though I know something about the origin of that word.
Well, we're being disarmed by the official narrative, Dr. Herndon. Here in Hamilton County, we're disarmed because the Bob Colby, the director of the Chattanooga Hamilton County Air Pollution Control Board, says, citing an EPA fact sheet that's been unchanged virtually since for 15 years, these are contrails, these are water vapor. evidences. But your discovery in advancing the story of federal geoengineering as against us is that the material is coal fly ash. Well, tell my listener briefly about the controversy, the sort of the academic ethical controversy flying around one of your academic papers, the main paper that I was just flabbergasted to read.
Let me tell you
what happened there.
Okay. The first paper that I published providing evidence identifying coal fly ash and the problem of aluminum toxicity poisoning humanity. I published in Current Science, which is published in association with the Indian Academy of Sciences. It was peer-reviewed. It was published. Well, almost immediately, the editor received a barrage of negative comments. And, none of them were true. But one of them said that that I was just promoting chemtrail conspiracy theory. There's no evidence for it. If this is the whole CIA type of response, and they tried to get the editor to retract the paper.
And he did.
No, he did not. What he did, he asked me to respond in writing, and he was going to publish the letter from the disinformationist and requested permission to use their name. And immediately the guy said, no. Either he said it or his boss's boss. So that paper remained. Shortly after that, I published a much longer paper with more data and a public health journal. And this was peer reviewed. In fact, one of the reviewers was excellent and helped to make the paper even better. And this was published, and then the disinformationists attacked. They went after people in the journal. They even paid a visit to the editor, a face-to-face visit. And the editor retracted the paper and placed a list of reasons which were the lies that these disinformationists presented. Now, if you go to my website, nuclearplanet.com, the first section is more or less biographical stuff. Then the next section is about the toxic geoengineering. And the very first link that you come to tells the story about this retraction and has some additional links in it. I mean, this is unconscionable. And I'm still battling with people with that university system, because to me, it's as much a crime to prevent people from knowing the health consequences as it is spraying the particles, ordering the particles to be sprayed. I mean, this is terrible. It's deceiving the public and the scientific community on a grand scale.
If you want to read this paper, you can find a copy of it at Nooganomics.com. That's the website of me, your host, David Tulis. And the website, again, is Nooganomics.com. And if you're not sure what to look for, it's under the sky striping category, or you can do a find on Dr. Herndon's name, Herndon. I published parts of that, republished parts of that, and also his India paper, which is quite much shorter. And to give you, my listener, and my reader at that website for The Man Who Matters, a glimpse into this remarkable controversy over something happening here over Chattanooga. So just briefly, Dr. Herndon, are you pursuing kind of an ethics complaint against this journal?
Well, I pursued a complaint to the president of the journal. No. I'm pursuing two ways. I've been pursuing an ethics complaint to the journal. The journal ignores it. I've been pursuing a complaint against the professor, first to the president of Jackson State University, who, along with the committee, decided that, well, it's just between me and the journal. But I will tell you, any university who has on their staff a faculty member, a professor and dean who is deliberately retracting a public health paper based upon lies, thwarting the whole principle of scientific ethics, and deceiving the community. I mean, this is something, in my view, that has no place at a publicly funded university. And right now, my complaint is being elevated to the commissioner of Mississippi State Higher Education. And it will continue to go higher, because what that commissioner ought to do is ought to go to the district attorney for Mississippi and ask the matter to be investigated. What did that person offer or say or do or threaten to cause a professor to flip, to reverse himself in a manner that deceives the public?
Let me change the subject right quick, Dr. Herndon. Let me just change the subject. All right, coal fly ash is being poured into the sky. According to your analysis, you say in your paper you're 99% sure of the results of this research, which studies actual material and also other studies. Why is coal ash this is a recycling program gone big. This is a recycling program that's gone into the air. Coal ash is very versatile, and in here it's being put to a kind of a massive governmental recycling use. In what other fields is coal ash a benefit? Because some people are viewing coal ash as a benefit.
Let me first step back and say, by the virtue of the amount of spraying that's involved, we're talking about tens of millions of tons a year of very fine particles that are maybe 1 micrometer or smaller in diameter. Now, if you tried to manufacture those particles from rock, imagine the vast mining operations, crushing rock and crushing it to powdering it. I mean, we're talking about vast physical circumstances, and yet for the utilities have all of this infrastructure in place, because the coal fly ash starts out in that small size range and it's trapped. So it's just a question of maybe doing a small amount of maybe separating an even finer part out and shipping it where it needs to go.
And
so I mean, the infrastructure is all there.
Well, let me ask about
advantage. But now let me talk about the other uses.
Go ahead.
Always trying to find uses for coal fly ash, and one of them is adding it to cement. I'm not sure how wise that is. Another is using it as a soil amendment. Now, there was an article, I think it was published in Mother Jones, about an instance in California when some vegetable crops, I'm not sure whether it was spinach or something, routinely were tested and found to have toxic levels of thallium in them. And somebody went back to check why that was, and the reason is because they were fertilizing the organic, this is organic vegetables, right? They were fertilizing the soil with coal fly ash, which is a toxic nightmare. I mean, it's got thallium, and thallium used to be used in rat poisoning. I mean, it's bad stuff.
Dr. Herndon, we're out of our time. I wanted to thank you very much for giving my listener and me your time. Thank you so much, Dr. J Marvin Herndon.
It's my pleasure.
Dr. Herndon is the man who's exposed what's happening in the skies over Chattanooga and Helmand County. It's coal fly ash recycling program gone wild. This is David Tulis.